Welcome to my fishing room. If you're watching this video right now, you want to learn a little bit more about the Fenwick Elite HMG spinning rod. I have one. I have many other original HMG carbons that are behind me here. But today we're going to do a 6-month review from my first video on the rod. And we're going to go over a few things like what I enjoyed about the rod, how I felt it performed. I'm even going to supply some video so you can see the actual action of the rod, and then maybe some ideas on what I'm looking forward to Fenwick coming out with in the future. Based on that, let's go check it out. You can see I've got them both here. This is the original carbon, and this is the Elite. These are both the same weight and action. So these are medium light, fast action rods. The Elite claims to be lighter, and for the most part, that's what I've found to be true, especially on the balance. Even with the comparable rod, if we look at the balance point, I'm just going to scoot this over just a little bit. If we look at the balance point on these rods, you can see if I run my hand on the cork, and I have to keep inching it back. That's on the original. So that's about your balance point right there. Little behind the front cork. If we put this off here and we take a look at the Elite HMG, if I go right on that front cork, there's your balance point right up front, right where the blank enters the handle. And that's where I prefer to have it. So in the 6 months I've had it, I found that this handle actually agrees with my hand position better than the original HMG, although I do like the original HMG handle grip, and we'll go over that in just a second. For now, if you take a look at the newer handle, there is some molding issues there. It's not as pretty. And this could just be from a first production run. This was the first Elite HMG I've received. I haven't seen any in stores yet, but there may be some out there, just not here in Utah. If we look right here in the molding where your hand grip is, it's pretty inconsistent. This is pretty jagged on the mold. Now, I don't know if they're cutting this by hand, if they're cutting this opening by hand. On the other side, it's a little more consistent. Still a little jagged, but it doesn't come in contact with my palm. It doesn't cause any rubbing of any kind. And I tend to position my pinky behind the main arm off the reel. And then as I'm casting a lot or I'm fatiguing, sometimes I'll reposition my hand, only because I have bony hands. And so I'll get rub here on my knuckles between that. So I'll transition up front. And for that transition, this grip with the smoother lines and more radiuses works better for me. So I think that was a definite improvement. So we'll take a look at the original HMG right here. We'll scoot this one over just a bit. You can see it's a little more aggressive in the edges here, a little more flat base. It's got a greater taper on the top. So when I do utilize this one, in fact, we're gonna switch places so we can see. When I do position this way, this wide handle position here really does cut into my knuckles. It does wear on the knuckles. I like the thumb groove here on both sides, whether you're right or left-handed. That thumb groove does fit very well. But when I transition up here, these knots, these big knots, sit into my palm. So don't like that as much now that I have tried the new Elite. That has been a great improvement. I've had this HMG, again, it's the exact same action and model for power as the Elite. I've had this one for about a year. I really do enjoy running this type of rod with the Supreme XT reels. They're extremely smooth. On this rod, I'm running the 30 XT, and I haven't had any problems with it necessarily. There was an issue that I did have early on. I was throwing 3/8 ounce Blue Fox, and I really huck these things out there, and you'll see in the video. in the slow-mo on the action of the rod. But I really do huck these things. These are 3/8, so not the largest, but they are my preferred for length of cast and control. I do hand paint them after a little bit of time when I want to get certain colors out of them that they don't offer, and that does add a little weight. So when you see me throwing these, the action will be just a little different because these aren't true 3/8. I do change the hooks out, and I will put split rings on them in order to change the hooks out for newer hooks in different types. So if you're not doing that and you are using off the shelf 3/8 or half ounce or quarter or whatever you're using, my comparison may not be direct because I know that this amount of paint and type of paint will actually change the weight and performance of that lure. But that gives you an idea of what I'm running when I'm throwing these things. Getting back to the original HMG, on the handle side, I did like it. I thought that it was a very pretty setup. I like the double lock on the thread portion, and I thought the handle actually balanced really well. But now that I have used the Elite HMG, I've noticed a few more little things, like their cork on this section has some pretty significant pits, missing material. You'll get oils from your hands. You can see this one's starting to darken from the oils in my hands, but things are holding up well. I still like that carbon weave representation in the handle here. I think it's super pretty, and I've really enjoyed having it. If we roll it over, let's take a look at the eyelets. On the Elite, honestly, I've put just about the same amount of pressure on this rod, both in casting and retrieval. And you can see that the resin that they wrap on the threads here, they roll over on the threads, it hasn't even started to chip or crack from flexing yet. And usually if it's going to happen, for me, it happens down here on the first eyelet. But the wear on them, pushing through trees and shrubs and bushes and dunking in water and bending tips and stuff like that, really there's no wear on them. I'm impressed about, because if we take a look at my other HMG, for example, and I'm going to try to see if this will focus on it. I'm not sure that it will, but you can see down in the groove how it's beginning to separate and turn white from cracking. It's normal to do that. It's not a flaw necessarily. I just find it interesting that right now the Elite seems to resist that a little better for the same amount of wear and time in the water. Just a little side note, I thought I might show the type of lures and spinners that I use. This is the one I just showed. These color patterns are what I have actually painted on these lures. I prefer to paint them because I can get the color combinations that I'm actually looking for particular species of fish. I do a lot of brown trout fishing, but I do love to go after cutthroat and rainbows, and sometimes I just go after whatever's biting. Here's a great example of that exact lure. I'm going across stream here. I'm going to pull it over. You'll see here in just a second I get a good solid lockup. There it is. Good fight. Nice backbone on that rod. You can see that bend in it. Good control. Can pull that fish up without exhausting it, get it to the surface so I can deal with him, get him back into the water.
There we go.
Very nice. But these are examples of the number 3 blue fox. This one has the tail on it, feather tail. And I will change these hooks out. And many times what I'll do is I'll actually put a split ring in here in order to change the hooks out without damaging the main shank for spinning, so it stays spinning well. These are 3/8. This is Panther Martin, also 3/8. I prefer the heavier. Here's an example of the split ring that I'll use when I change my hooks out, try different hooks and whatnot. This rod, the Elite HMG, does throw super light, at least in this configuration in the medium light fast action. It does throw the super light Rapalas very well. The action is fantastic. You can really feel the vibration and the movement of the Rapala, which I couldn't necessarily feel it as sensitively on the original HMG. Good example right here on this Rapala. Toss it, pulling it, giving it some good action. Then I change direction, and that's where I get the strike. Right here, pop. And I've got the control of that fish with this rod. I can get him over to me. You see him kicking around. But I don't have to play with him very long. I can get him over to me really quick, get him in the net, get him dealt with, and then we can get him back in the water so he's healthy and he's ready for another angler. Good looking fish. Thanks for the fight. Back you go. Now that does two things. Number one, it allows me to know what that lure is doing and where it's going, whether it's diving deep, whether it's snagged up on water weed or something like that, and the difference between the strike of a fish or when it goes to strike and it grazes right by your lure. Many of us have felt that. But the one downside that I have noticed with the Elite HMG, and this could be because it's more sensitive and it is lighter, I almost wonder if it's not as rigid as the original HMG. And in so, it's when I feel a strike and so I pull back on the rod to lock that hook. And when I do, I don't feel necessarily on this Elite whether or not I've got as much backbone to drive that hook in. It could be me, but I almost feel like the HMG original carbon had a little more power and backbone in that regard. Now that I've had this Elite for 6 months or so and been working with it regularly. On the topic of power and backbone, here's a little example on a medium-sized brown trout with a 3/8 lure and the Elite. I'm gonna pull it. I'm going to change direction here. I can see him from my angle, and so I'm going to give it some action and hook him up right about here. You're going to see that rod tip pull on him, get that hook in. But here's the problem is I don't think it had enough rigid backbone in it to keep that hook sank, and he pops it right about here, comes out comes the lure. Still a fine rod. I don't have any real qualms about taking it, using it, abusing it, seeing what its performance limitations are. I'm gonna just take a second here, throw on some gear and head down to a stream. It's about 19 or 20 degrees and we're gonna do some 3/8 casting, see if we can catch anything, but at the same time, show you the actual action of the rod. I'll be using this 3/8 Blue Fox spinner. This is a standard gold that I've painted with black and red. The paint does add a little bit more weight, so you may get somewhat different performance in the rod, but not by much, and certainly not enough to notice. All right, here comes the preload. And then as I change direction, you'll see the bend in that on the load and the release. Casting about 20 yards up on the left, underneath that tree, and I was able to target it perfectly without having to really rip it out there. On a longer casting example here, I'm going to take it out to between 50 and 65 yards. You'll see with more power how that blank responds. It's got that deep arc in it as it fires out and hits on target. Let's see how she works on some fish here. So I'm taking it out about 30 yards. I'm gonna bring it down towards the water top in order to keep it low. Right about here, I get a lock up. There's the sensitivity up top to sink it. And here he comes. Again, rod has great performance when it comes to controlling fish, getting them up to me so I can deal with them and get them back into their environment. As light and nimble as this rod is, I'm really happy with the amount of control I get on the fish to get them up out of the water, just so we're not damaging them or causing them overexhaustion. And right here you see a nice little brown trout. We'll let him go and move on. My final question on this rod would be, would I spend my hard-earned money on another one? If I saw it in stores. If I'm being totally honest, I haven't seen this rod sold in stores yet. I have seen the Elite Walleye. I've even seen the Elite Tech, but I haven't seen the Elite HMG. I haven't seen it in this weight. And so I went online, and when I did to try and locate it, the best I could do was find images of this rod with distributors like Cabela's and Sportsman's and Shields, but the images were different. Even though you were searching for Elite, it just came up with the HMG. Same color, same print, same everything, but it just says HMG right here in place of the Elite. So I don't know if it's a different rod, or maybe they just changed the type on the blank. I have no idea right now. But if that is the same rod and I am able to locate it, I would buy 3 more of these rods. I would. I would love to try different reels in different sizes. And this, for Utah and the water and the type of fish that I'm fishing for here, especially in moving water like your streams and rivers, this weight and length is perfect. This rod overall was extremely easy to use, fun, durable, and precise. If anybody has any information on these rods, these Elite HMG specifically, where they can be found, whether or not they're available, whether or not Fenwick went in a different direction with this particular model, I'd love to hear about it. Outside of that, it has been a fantastic rod, minus the first production, which I am convinced this is a first production run that they sent me. And that's why I had commented on some of the cutouts and the quality of them, and the cork having gouges and inconsistencies in it. Minus that, the rest of the rod has been fantastic. And for that reason, and how it works with the fish and the species I'm working with, I'd buy it all over again. I hope this review has been helpful to you, if not entertaining and enjoyable. If there are other things that you think you'd like to see me review, let me know. Otherwise, I've got some more things coming up. In the meantime, get out there and fish.